Hello, it's Zutshi here. In this property education video, I've got some fantastic news if you own HMOs or you want to have HMOs. HMOs are houses of multiple occupation. It's a fantastic strategy that can give you a very high cash flow because instead of renting out a property to a family or to a young couple, instead you rent the property on a room by room basis. Now this is very good for the tenants because it's far more cost effective for them to live in a shared house where the rent and the bills are included instead of living on their own in an apartment where they have to pay the rent and the bills on top. So it's a way of providing really affordable accommodation for people who can't afford to buy their own property. And for the landlord, it's really good as well, because if you think about it, the rent you get on all the rooms added together, even once you take off the bills, is much more than you'd get as a single let property. So a good HMO should make at least £1,000 profit per month. It could make a lot more than that. Now, there have been a couple of challenges to HMOs, and when COVID hit and all the energy prices went up, people said, oh, I don't know if HMOs work anymore. And then also there's another problem with council tax banding. Now, let me explain a little bit about what the problem was and then the good news that the government have just released about this. So when you have an HMO, typically the landlord will pay for all the bills. They'll pay for the gas, the electric, the water, the TV license, broadband internet, and the council tax for that singly banded property. However, the problem is the VOA office, the Valuation Office, have sometimes been looking at HMOs and say, well, I think they're kind of independent residences. And so some landlords have been faced with a bill for individual rooms in an HMO. Now, in theory, if it's an individually banded, the tenant should pick up the cost of that. But if you have an HMO where the landlord's saying, we'll pay all the bills, but you've got to pay your own council tax, it makes it uncompetitive, especially if just down the road, there's another property where the whole house is banded as one council tax, and that means it's more cost effective for the landlord and also for the tenant. So it's an interesting point because a lot of campaigning went on to the government, and the government kind of said, well, we're not so sure if houses should be individually banded. We think they should be one property. Now, the reason a lot of the councils want to individually band all the rooms is obviously they bring a lot more revenue in from council tax by individually banding. But the problem is, if they do that, there's a good chance the landlords pass on that cost to the tenant, so it makes it more expensive for the tenant to live in the property. And actually, there's already a housing and accommodation shortage in the UK, so that would put rents up even more and cause even more hardship for many people. So the councils want to kind of grab this money, and it's either going to hit the landlord, who might decide, I don't want to be a landlord anymore, or it's going to be impacting on the tenants. So the government luckily has seen this, and they have now said that actually councils cannot individually band into individual rooms in HMOs. They have to be a single banded property. Now, the councils had an argument saying, well, actually, maybe that's unfair because there's more rubbish that needs collecting from these kind of properties. There's more, pressure on the community. And that may be a valid point. So I think they might look at having a slightly different rate for HMOs, but at least they're not going to be individually banded. And the real problem was where you had a council where some properties were single banded and some had the individual room banding. And I think that happens. It was actually linked to planning applications. You would think the VO office would go and look at the entire HMO register and contact all the landlords and say, we want to come and inspect your property, but they haven't done that. And I think it's when a planning application goes in, that what seems to trigger the interest of the Valuation Office. They come round and then decide if it should be individually banded or not. But as I said, the government has passed this consultation document and said actually they don't think it should be done. So that's the recommendation they're making to councils. So this is really good news for all of us who own HMOs. We can continue to provide very cost-effective accommodation for our tenants, so they get a really good deal, but we make really good profit. And that's what I call a real win-win. And whenever we're investing in property, we want to look for the win-win that works for everybody. And the great thing about HMOs is that there's a really high demand for this for a couple of reasons. First of all, when someone moves to a new city, or maybe they move out of living with mum and dad, rather than getting at a place on their own, people sometimes like to move into a shared house because they get a bit of an instant social life. You've got people who are like them, they go to the pub with, etc. And it's much easier to move into a new place if you've got some like-minded people you're living with. Not to mention it being far more cost effective as well. But the thing about HMOs is that a lot of people don't like HMOs because they said, oh, isn't there an oversupply? And yes, there is an oversupply of HMOs in most areas. But here's the key thing. If you're going to do HMOs, you don't want to do average HMOs, which is what most landlords do. They got the magnolia walls, the not so good furniture that might match, might not. If you're going to do HMOs, you have to go high end. What that means is you want to have properties that look fantastic. Properties where actually you and I think, actually, we wouldn't mind living there ourselves. Maybe don't want to share with all these other people, but they're a really nice house, really good quality. And here's the thing, when you have a really good quality property, you attract a more discerning type of tenant who's prepared to pay more for that accommodation because it's really high quality accommodation. And because it's not just renting a room in a house, it's kind of getting into this community, this co-living community idea. Actually, tenants tend to stay a lot longer and they're paying more rent. So it's actually in your interest as a landlord, and it's in your tenant's interest to make sure you're providing really good standard accommodation. Unfortunately, when most people think about HMOs, they think about very average HMOs or below average HMOs, and that's one of the things that gets landlords a bad name. My campaign to all of our students is, look, let's make sure we're providing really good quality, affordable accommodation to our tenants. Now, rents have gone up a lot, and that's a kind of supply and demand thing. So, you know, I do feel for some tenants when rents have gone up, but many landlords typically don't increase the rent as much as they could. If a tenant's been there for a long time, you tend to leave the rent the same, and only when that tenant moves out do you then redress that and increase the rent. So most landlords right now are probably not charging as much as they should do. So you get a lot of tenants who are moaning, complaining. Well, actually, maybe you haven't got such a bad deal if you've got a good landlord who's not been putting your rents up. Cost of living's gone up for everyone, wages have gone up, so at some point most landlords will be correcting their rents up, but that hasn't happened right now. But anyway, the reason of this video was just to let you know the really good news. The government has decided that it's not fair to individually ban those rooms. They're going to stop this aggregation. In fact, it's going to be one banding for those properties. So great news for everyone, for landlords and also for tenants. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. I'd love you to click the like, come and put a comment. What do you think about this individual banding? And make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel and also hit the bell icon, because whenever something comes out that's topical like this, you want to make sure you're seeing the video really quickly and be able to take action from it if necessary. I often share opportunities. In fact, next month I'm going to be sharing an opportunity how you can secure an incredible deal at a certain time of year as long as you take action. So a lot of my videos are timely. That's why you want to watch them as soon as they come out. So make sure you like, subscribe and hit the bell icon to make sure you get notified whenever these come out. Until next time, I encourage you to invest with knowledge, invest with skill. Hey, it's Simon here. I do hope you've just enjoyed that video on YouTube. I hope you took lots of notes, and more importantly, you're going to take action. And what I'd encourage you to do is click on the link in the description below the video. I've got some live online training that's very relevant to the video you've just watched. Come and register for that training. Join me live online, and you can actually get your questions answered live as part of that training. So take the opportunity to come and join me live online. Click on the link below and secure your spot before you miss the date. Take action right now. As ever, I encourage you to invest in knowledge, invest with skill. Enjoy the next video.